I've got a feeling you're really going to enjoy today's interview. You get to meet a lady who had a double major in piano and violin, and how busking played an influence on her career. She also gives credit to Scarlett Rivera, Bob Dylan's violinist, who paved the way for her, and you'll get to see how they reconnected. And there's also another Dylan connection in there. So, hey, check it out. Hey, everybody, I'm really excited about my guest today. Just to give you some background, I was at the bitter end. I was listening to Scarlett Rivera and my good friend Diane Lotney. And lo and behold, two guest musicians came up. And one was the guest that we have today. Great violinist, excellent backstory, beautiful voice. We're going to dive into her music, and I want to welcome Heather Lil Mama Hardy to the Long Island Sound Podcast. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, that was a really great night. And
oh my God, it really was.
To watch you, I was taking a lot of photos that night, and I was watching you off to the side. You looked like even before you got on stage, you were really enjoying the show. So it was really nice. And the other guest, for those who are listening and watching, was Christine Santelli, who was a guest on the podcast. We had a lot of fun with Christine, great blues guitarist, and you guys team up as well. And we'll get into all of that. So I'm reaching you out in Tucson, and where were you born? I couldn't even find any of that stuff. Where'd you grow up?
New Rochelle, New York.
Okay.
And then when I was 2, I was raised up my parents moved to Westport, Connecticut.
Oh,
and so that's where I was raised. And then I went back to New York to go to music school, went to Manhattan School of Music.
Yep. And I was reading your bio, and this just, it kills me because I wish I started really early. I think you started playing the piano at the age of 6, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How the hell does that happen? Number one, being a parent, how do you get a 6-year-old to have any attention to play the piano? But anyway, you fill me in.
You know, what was cool was our house in Westport was right next to a place called the Westport School of Music.
Oh, okay.
And it was just, a family home that had a lot of bedrooms and had been turned into this music school. And so, I mean, from the time I was 2, all day long, I would hear pianos, like people practicing and taking lessons, and especially in the summertime.
Okay.
You'd hear them. And so I think that really sparked an interest as a little kid. But my parents, especially my mom, were from that generation that every home has a piano in it. I mean, that's just the way it was. You always have a piano for somebody.
Right.
So when I was young, my mom was like, we should get a piano for the kids. And everybody in Westport had boats. That was the big thing, that they have boats. And so that's what my father kind of wanted, was to get a boat. And so it was a big thing in the family that I had said, yeah, I wanted a piano. I was interested. And my father was like, if you don't keep playing that piano, we're going to sail it down the Saugatuck River, because that's my boat. So I just loved it. I just immediately took to music. It was my happy place.
Really? Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And I always you'll find out I come out of left field with a lot of stuff. And I've always found people who are like instantly good at music were also good at math. There was something in their brain that kind of clicks. Was it like that for you as well?
It was, actually. I can't say I had a passion for math, but for somebody that didn't work that hard at it, I did pretty good in math. Okay. And I ended up being on a math team, in junior high for a minute. But, like anything else, if you really want to get good, you got to have a passion for it. And, but I agree, it's a lot of counting. If you're going to learn to read music, it's a lot of division and counting and dividing and numbers. It's a numbers game.
Right. So this leads to another question. Do you think in music? Do you think in keys, or how does your mind work
That's a
with
really
that?
interesting question for me because yes, I do. I mean,
Okay.
I studied classical, and so I read music, I, learn theory. But when, as a violinist, I started really jamming and getting into improvisational music, uh, for me, it was an ear thing.
Okay.
Like I had learned my instrument, enough to know where the notes are and what they sound like. So it was more about being able to play what you hear in your head. So I'm not like a lot of my fellow musicians are really deeply into theory and modes and chord,
Progressions.
think
Yeah.
quarterly. I think more, you know, sonically, I guess you would say.
Right. And what I've learned playing the guitar is one, you learn the mechanics of it, but then you're training your ear to recognize different things. And
Exactly.
the one thing that always amazed me about the violin, the fact it has no frets. So this is my assumption. You correct me. I'm a knucklehead, so you correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to be the teacher for a little while. Is it's all muscle memory and your feel of where that note is, as opposed to a fret
100%.
telling you where it's going to be. So that is cool. And then also, it's probably the closest instrument to the human vocal cord. I would think.
Yeah.
Am I?
In
Yeah.
fact, the Sufi religion
Okay.
says that the violin is the closest instrument other than the voice to connecting with God because
Oh,
it's so
nice.
vocal like. So just a
Interesting.
little aside. Yeah.
Yeah, and just this is going off in different tangents, but so you have the violin. It's right up on your chin. So you have, I assume, the vibration, not only the sonic, but the vibration or the feel of it. Uh,
Hmm.
this was that tough getting used to because you switched. You originally had two majors, right? Piano and violin when you
Yeah.
went to the
Yeah.
Manhattan school. How was it? So had you picked up the violin prior? You must have picked. What am I saying? How long had you played the violin? I guess before you got
So
into.
the violin, I started at 7, and that was public school offered string instruments at 7. So that's why I did it. And then again, I had an affinity for it. I loved it. And we were lucky to have a very cool school program. The music
Right.
in that area was really good. So I just did both.
I hate you. I hate you like right off the bat. It's like 6, 7, two instruments, Manhattan School. I feel like a numbskull. You're gonna have to teach me a lot about this.
You're
So, hey, in your bio, it looked to me as you started. You were talking about improvisation, and I assume being in Manhattan at that time, you were doing some busking somewhere. Tell me about that
Mhm.
journey, because I found that was like a new word to me because I haven't done it. And I had another guest on it, and it changed her life in music. And I'm curious how that worked for you.
I would agree with that guess 100%. Initially, you move to Manhattan, there's, just street musicians as subway musicians everywhere. And that turned me on. I always thought they were really cool. I loved that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started taking my violin out and playing classical to make money, make a little extra money and practice. It was a fun way to practice. Uh, and then I started meeting musicians in the subway that,
Okay.
we both wanted the same spot. Oh, well, let's play together, So that opened up this huge world of, playing, especially Dylan, which will bring us back to talking about Scarlett,
Oh
okay?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
she was highly influential at that time. But yeah, it was the 80s in New York, and, people were playing all kinds of classic, what is now classic rock and roll. And so that just is how I cut my teeth.
Hey.
And the great thing in the subway is there's not, it's not like being on a stage where, you don't do it if you're not prepared. But in the subway, you can have some fun. People have all the freedom to walk away. If they like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they move on. There's no discussion.
Right.
So I felt free to try.
Okay.
And of course, New York has great talent everywhere. So I feel like I played with as high level a musician here and there in the subway as I have in my whole career. You know, I met
Oh,
some real
amazing.
gems.
Now,
Yeah.
my assumption would be when you were doing it, you probably didn't have to audition for the MTA, which they have to do now, by the way.
Yes, that's changed.
Isn't that wacky? You have to audition for to play in the damn subway, which is,
Yeah.
I can understand an aspect. It's a money grab. I don't know what the hell it is, but
I'm
going,
not sure what their philosophy is about that, but I think, you know, it was a little risque, I guess, when I was doing it. You know, it was a
okay.
little bit, you have to be a little bit wacky and not afraid. And then people realize, yeah, it's a real source of income. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
good and you're down there working hard, especially for a musician, it's like, well, that's, you know, I could play a gig at night and make some decent money during the day. So it became very competitive. And I think they wanted to just organize how that worked, you know,
Right.
rather
And
than
I guess
a free for all.
better for the city to organize than some other entities organize things,
Exactly.
I guess for you. But also at the time, if you think about the now, where is the Manhattan School? Is it up on the west side?
It's up on 123rd and Broadway. So it's up in
Okay,
Harlem, west
yeah,
side.
it's up in Harlem. But what's great for those who don't know, what's great about New York City, it's 1,000 neighborhoods, in my opinion.
Oh,
And
yeah.
within a few minutes, you're down in the village in the land of Bohemia, and playing in Washington Square Park and running into other people and stuff like that. Besides the subway system itself, and hey, let's talk about Scarlett, because that's I'll give a little preview. So Scarlett Rivera, who you idolize, I would assume, right, as a pioneer in crossing over, I would say, from a classically trained violinist to folk and rock and roll. Was walking on this. This is a story from the lips of the horse, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
Walking on 13th Street between First and Second. Car pulls up. Window rolls down in the back. It's Dylan. Bob Dylan says, "Hey, I can't do a Dylan voice." He says, "Hey, can you play that thing?" She leans over. First, she thinks, "Is this a Dylan lookalike?" Because everyone started dressing like him in the early '70s. She says, "Yeah." And boom, they go and jam together, and she gets on the Desire album. She's on the Rolling Thunder Review, and really kind of conquers it. Really. Anyway, so tell me about what you think. I guess I'm sorry, I'm
Well,
yapping too much here.
first of all, it's funny because I was excited to hear that story from her mouth as well. I was like, "Is it really true?" You know, because you get all this folklore and it's like, did that really happen? And I didn't know that story when I was playing in the subways and playing in the street on Bleecker Street and on First Avenue and all these places. So, you know, of course, once you hear it, you're like, this could happen to me. You know, you're waiting for that moment.
Right.
Uh, but I was turned on to her because I had started pursuing improvisational music. And, you know, at the time, Jean-Luc Ponty,
Okay. Yeah.
Papa John Creech was playing with Hot Tuna,
Right. Right.
and Jefferson Starship. I'm trying to think. There was David LaFlame from It's a Beautiful Day. There was a few violin players that were playing rock and roll, and but not tons. And Jean-Luc Ponty was a pretty intimidating person to try to emulate when you're getting started. I mean, the guy's just he's very advanced. Let's put it like that.
Okay.
And my strength has always been expression in playing. I mean, I got technique, but the soul, it was always about the soul for me.
Right.
So a friend of mine said, you got to check out this violin player on the Desire record. And he
Okay.
gave me the record. And I mean, her technique is wonderful. But what's happening on that record is not about technique. It's about playing the right notes that fit the song so
Right.
beautifully and color a picture. And she did it throughout the album. So it's like the whole thing takes you on this journey. And it was accessible for me. So it was like, hey, I can do that. That I can do. You know what I mean? And I learned every note that she played on that
Did
record.
you?
You know what I
Wow.
mean? Oh, yes, I did. And just loved it. And similar to Dylan as a singer, he's not Aretha Franklin as a singer, but he tells a story and touches you with his song. So you realize there's all these different ways to approach music, and yeah, she just inspired me so much, and then meeting her and what a lovely human she
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
Just it was everything. It was great.
So what I find interesting and what I'm hearing from you is you got to meet Pioneer in the direction where you wanted to take your improv, and I want to explore improv a little bit with you as well. And you had other examples out there to emulate and to kind of cut the path for you. I mean, when I was a kid in high school, the only fiddle player that I knew was a Charlie Daniels. Was
Right.
The whole
And
Southern rock
still
thing.
today, that's all anybody knows. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's like that's a fiddle player, and not to disparage fiddle players. It has to do with the genre that you're playing in. But you brought up a really good point, and that's one of my barometers for when I listen to music is that person that's accompanying the singer, the band, whatever, playing to the song.
Yes.
I'm an anti-shred guy. You know what I mean? If it pulls away from the song, if it draws your attention of, hey, look at me, I'm like, forget you I'm sorry, that's a New York thing. I said forget you. You know what I meant though. So playing to the song is just an art and a nuance, and you summed it up in one word, and that's soul. You bring soul to it. Now, listening, by the way, I've been digesting your music for the past couple of days. It's great. And I just want to tell the audience, look down in the description. You're going to see all the YouTube videos that Heather has done from the song you did that has the Day of the Dead, Ain't Gonna Live Without
Oh,
You.
yeah.
Great videos, by the way. Great videographer, whoever directed.
Thank you.
Did a wonderful job at it. But I was getting into playing to the song. But you're a triple threat. Piano, violin, and a soulful singer. So you kind of pull it all together, which makes for me a great experience when I see somebody play.
No, that's so nice. Thank you.
We'll
Thank you.
just
The
sit with that
singing was
compliment.
very, huh?
No,
What did
I
you
said
say?
we'll sit with that compliment for a moment.
I know, right? I'm just soaking in for a second.
Yeah, tell me about this thing. Did that come natural as well?
No, so fast forward, and we'll probably end up going backwards and forwards. But after living in New York for numerous years, I ended up coming out to Amity program in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay.
And I'm not shy to say to anybody, I had a drug problem, and I was playing in a punk band in New York that heard about this guy that was helping people that, had substance abuse issues and bringing them to Arizona.
Right.
So I had a very kind of angel-like person show up in the subway and offer me an opportunity to go to Tucson to this rehab. We call it a therapeutic community.
Oh, great.
And so that's how I landed out here in Tucson. Amazing experience. I learned a lot, changed my life. But I intended to come right back to New York.
Right.
And people at this place said, there's this really amazing guy in town. He's a blues artist. His name's Sam Taylor. And he had also come here to clean up from LA.
Okay. Nice.
And they said it'd probably be good for you before you rush back to the scene to have some time, outside of program to get back into playing. And what a good person to get with. So I ended up joining Sam's band and had a 20-year run with one of the great blues artists of our time. And you can look him up. He's in the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. So, yeah, he's a legendary cat. So that was a very magical part of my life, how the stars aligned.
Is he still with us?
Sadly, no. Yeah,
Oh,
he's been
okay.
gone about 8 years,
Oh,
but
okay.
highly influential. And he's the guy that got me, I had played some blues in the subway with a wonderful guy by the name of Irving Lewis Latin. He's a big New York blues artist.
Okay.
And, but I hadn't done a lot of blues, and Sam just swooped me in. And that's when blues became my preferred genre, let's say. I like
Okay.
playing everything. I
Right,
really
right.
do. And I like listening to everything, but that became kind of home for me because of Sam, and he got me singing. It never occurred to me to even try to sing. And
Really?
I still kind of downplay my own singing. I don't feel like that's my strength,
Oh, cut it
but
out. Oh,
again, I can deliver
cut
a
it.
song,
Oh, come on,
you
cut
know.
it out. What I've heard,
Whatever. That's just being real,
that's just,
if
that
you
that humility is overrated. So just cut it out, will you?
okay.
Hey,
Listen, if you all like it, I'm happy with that.
Heather, let's do this. Let's just take a quick break, and then I want to
Okay.
explore improvisation, the busking a bit, and really getting the pulse of music from the people, because I think that's something that we've missed over the years. And maybe that's a new resurgence that I have a gut feeling about. I don't know. Hey, everybody, we'll be back with Heather Lil Mama Hardy. Stick with us. There's a lot more to explore.
The Long Island Sound is here to help you connect with local artists. Follow us on Instagram for the latest up-to-date podcast episodes and also to connect with your local artists and their upcoming shows.
Hey, we're just having a laugh. This is Steve Yusko, and you know who I am, because if you listen to this podcast, and I am with Heather Lil Mama Hardy, and we are back. Good to have you back, Heather.
Nice to be here. Still here.
I wanted to explore, I think it was an interesting turn in your career with the busking in New York City. Now you're going to this really fancy school for classical music, and then you take this turn towards the blues. And that's your home now, so to speak, and you like different genres. Tell me about that move and why. What's the big deal about improvisation for an artist? How's that for a question?
That's an excellent question. It's a hard question for me because I really, really loved classical music. I love digging into that. But there is something about playing what comes out of your heart, letting the music come through you rather than from you is
okay.
kind of a way I approach it, and what you commented earlier about being a piece of the song, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like being part of the collaborative thing. Now you have that in classical music, absolutely, but the intimacy when it gets into working with the band, and those relationships that develop, and that it's just this beautiful language and dance that happens. So I just really fell in love with it. And it was interesting. I had a very prominent teacher at Manhattan School named Raphael Bronstein.
Okay.
And he was 96 when I was studying with him. I mean, he was the guy. Wow. And I started playing, in the subways and with this punk band, actually, that was doing a lot of touring. And I was talking to him about it. And he said, listen, when we accepted you, it was for your interpretation, that was your strength. He said there are, 6-year-old, violinists that have been playing since they were 6 from all over the world, practicing 12 hours a day, that have technique that I probably will never have. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure.
There's a lot of them. It's a very competitive field. And he said, but you can't learn the soul. That's the hard part. You practice the other stuff. So he said, if you're finding a career in that direction, he supported that. So that was nice. A big deal for me to get his permission and kind of his stamp on on improvisation as a valid form of music and a valid career. You know, it wasn't, you didn't make it as a classical player, you're playing rock. He was like, no, man, if that's what you're digging, that's what you should be doing. So that was a big piece for me. And then I started working with another teacher in New York named Julie Lieberman for not too long. And she had a very, I guess I would call it philosophical, spiritual approach to music. And I dug that a lot. And, you know, she felt it's a calling and that, you know, kind of identifying your own personal expression was, you know, it's like a way to elevate yourself as a human beyond just as a musician, you know? So all those pieces, but, you know, when it comes to blues and stuff, it makes me want to dance. It makes me happy. It's fun, you know? Yeah, those are the things that turn me on. Playing with Christine, it's fun. We have a great time. We're funky. We're emotional, you know, all those colors. So, and I've had a really wonderful career with, as far as the people I've gotten to play with. It's just,
well,
you know, I feel like
I share in that with you in that, you know, I'm a hack musician, an amateur with a big A, amateur. And the many things that I've experienced, one is the joy of being with musicians and great storytellers. But the other thing is, and the guy who played with you on stage, Mike Nugent, is a good friend of mine, really plays to the song for sure and writes some really great stuff. But when I'm watching a band, it's almost like, hey, we're going, you know, we're taking this audience on a road trip. We're not telling you where the destination is or how long it's going to be to get there, but you're going to have fun on the way. And I've seen that with artists, which, you know, they're kind of vibing off each other and they're going off into a different direction. They're coming back, you know, back to the song. It's just it's a beautiful moment. And it's, you know, it's not scripted per se.
And the audience is part of that too. And I think that
good point.
Turned me on was, you know, in the classical world, the audience is very subdued. Stoic. As they should be, respectful, you know, and you're hoping upon hope that at the end they're going to clap, you know what I mean? Like there's no gut feeling about what's happening. In my world of music now, I'm feeling the audience all the time. And so they're feeding the experience as well. And if they're not, or let's say they're not there, then that's when the collaboration, it's like, well, now I'm going to feed off my players. You know, we're going to, if there's one guy in the room, we're going to play to that one guy in the room as if he's 50,000 guys, you know? So.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting as you're telling me about that, especially in a studio environment. And I actually learned this as a technique on speaking and doing these little videos that I do to promote the Long Island Sound podcast. Is one of the techniques they told us to do was say a person's name before you start talking, because I'm talking into a camera by myself. It's like I'm nuts, you know? And so now I do that. I say a name, and that makes it personal, or it puts me in that mindset, I guess. And that must be the same way in a studio when you don't have, quote, an audience who's just listening, but you have bandmates who are listening. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the engineer, you know? I mean, these are all the pieces I think the musicians who've had these experiences get, is sometimes, you know, you're doing a session and the feedback from that engineer is crucial. He's not the producer. Sometimes they don't want to say much because they don't want to throw their opinion. And I know for me, I'm like, I want your opinion. You're doing sessions all the time, you know? So yeah, you kind of find it wherever you can find it. But at the end of the day, you know, I find that when I don't remember what I played, I know that I played probably as good as I can play because I was in it. I wasn't thinking about it. And those experiences in the studio it's like, all right, well, that's the one. I can't do any better than that. That's as good as I am.
Gotcha.
But on stage, you just kind of enjoy those moments when they happen because they're the magic, and try to make them happen as often as possible.
Cool. So now tell me about the music scene in Tucson. I think it's God's excuse for, a living sauna out there all the time. But I'm sure it's very nice people. I just lost half the audience just now. But when I had reached out to you initially, this is like a month and a half ago, I had seen you had just done something with, I think, the Tucson Symphony Orchestra. Which
Pops.
So tell me about the music scene. Tell me about that. That looked really exciting.
That was thrill beyond thrill for me to perform with the Pops. That was really cool. I work with their conductor quite a bit on different projects. We do. He does a lot of tribute shows. He has a company, and he also runs the Tucson Jazz Festival. His name's Chris Dodge. To give him a plug, he's awesome. And He asked me to be the guest this year with the Pops, and he arranged one of Sam Taylor's songs, my mentor, one of the songs I've been doing for years, and one of my songs, and then a few other pieces that I chose. And so that was a huge thrill. That was a big one. But the music scene right now in Tucson, well, since I've been here, it's been very good. It's a great scene, great musicians. I'm continuously blown away by the talent. But we've gone through periods of, lots and lots of clubs, and then not so many. And right now they're calling us the New Austin, because there's a really, really strong music scene happening. The Tucson Jazz Festival has become kind of a destination for 2 weeks out of the year. When is
that, by the way?
That takes place, I think it might be starting next weekend. Because I'm performing on Martin Luther King Day. They do a free concert on Martin Luther King Day on January 20th. But it's a 2-week thing. A lot of national acts are in and out of town, and it's great. So,
nice.
So yeah,
Very
I feel
nice.
really good about the scene here. Summertime, not so much. That's why I come back to New York in the summer, because, it's hot as hell here.
Right, literally.
Yeah. But the funny thing about that is there's this audience. So we have lots of what we call snowbirds that are our audience throughout the year. And they all take off around April, maybe May if they stay late. Mm-hmm. And then there's this whole local audience that kind of shows their face again because they don't want to deal with the traffic of the snowbirds. And so you'd be surprised in the summertime at night when the sun goes down, there's a scene, people want to get out of the house.
Nice. Now, I don't know if we spoke off record on this, but you have a couple bands that you put together. You've been, I think you've been on like 200, played on different 200 albums. With your time all over the place. That's really neat. I mean,
yeah, it's great.
That's what's great about being a violinist, right? It's there's 1,000 guitarists, but the ratio must be different to people who do what you do and do it so well. I would assume with that, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't always correlate. Sometimes that works out well for me. Sometimes you don't need a violin player in the band, but you got to have a guitar player. You know what I mean? So, but again, you just do what you do and hope you get it.
Right. So let's go over the different genres that have violins in it. So do you play Celtic music as well? Or?
Mm-hmm.
So you tell me the different genres that kind of span your instrument.
Oh, as far as the instrument, well, I'll do a little plug, because you said talk about my brand. And I produce a show that I'm doing at the end of the month called More Violin. And that's exactly what it's about. It's 100 years of the violin in music. And I tell stories, and I just basically just try to show people all the places that the violin has been and exists. So we do everything from Cajun music, we do Celtic music, we do gypsy jazz, we do Jean LePonty, the Dixie Dregs with Jerry Goodman. We do that. Bluegrass, country, do some Kansas. So it's a really neat show, and it's for the exact reason you asked the question that I did it, because I know people love violin. They tell me all the time. People, as soon as they see the violin, like before they hear you play, they're like, "That's cool, I love violin." So I knew there's an audience for just kind of walking through how the violin has shown up in music, and it's basically a tribute. But the nice thing is that I switch it up. I have a featured violinist. I play throughout the show and host the show, but I always have another violinist. So we do some twin fiddles. And next year, it's going to be Scarlett.
Oh,
he's going to come and I do it at the Gaslight Theater here in Tucson.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
We just worked out. We don't have the dates, but I told her how cool would it be, because I tribute all these icons throughout music history. And so I think Tucson's going to freak out when an actual icon is part of our storytelling. So it's going to be pretty cool.
That's great. I actually sent her a text the other day wishing her Happy New Year. And I was talking to Diane Lotney, who's our mutual friend who put things together at the bitter end. And I was like, oh, what did she think of the Dylan, A Complete Unknown?
Oh, yeah.
She gave it 5 stars. So I was like, hey,
she
I
did.
really want to get, she did.
I
so
haven't
we'll just
seen
leave it
yet,
at that, because she's traveling now. She says, when I come back, I said, I'd love to have you back on, because I want to talk to somebody firsthand who knows the man and get the take on how he was portrayed. Well, and I think phenomenally. Have you seen the movie?
I have not. I've been asking so many people. I hear it's great.
It brought me to tears. It was that good. And what a difficult person to try and portray, Anyway, not to go on and on about that, but that was really kind of cool. And then I'll tell you another quick story, just another quick Dylan story. Because I'm yapping with a friend about Scarlett, and she goes, "Oh, did I ever tell you my Bob Dylan story?" I'm like, "Get out of here! What?" She goes, "I sat next to him on a plane leaving Minnesota. She worked for the airline. They sat him back, and guess what? They had this long conversation, and he wrote her a personal note, which she has to this day.
Wow!
So we're gonna do it." So which is rare. She had it authenticated and stuff like that. And so that's a podcast for another day. But hey, all right, let me ask you this.
I used to, when I was in the 80s, when I was working with this punk band, which was named the False Prophets, the guitarist worked with Allen Ginsberg. And so I worked with Allen for quite a while. And he had a lot of Bob Dylan stories too, because they hung out quite a bit. And all I'll say about that is, Alan said, he's a real character. Like, it was a very unusual cat, but they had, of course, great respect for each other's poetry,
Yeah. So I'm confused now, because I know Ginsberg as a poet. How did you get to work with him, and what kind of work did you do?
He had done oh, now you're
going to space out on me, aren't you?
Space out for a second. Give me a second. The poetry of... Oh, that's so terrible that I'm spacing out this poet. But he played harmonium, okay? He played like that little squeeze box harmonium that Indian, artists use. And so he had set poetry to music, and we performed it at Brooklyn University and St. Mark's Church, and highly, the New York Times came and reviewed the show. And so Alan loved to sing. Alan was a really, really cool guy. He again, his singing was not, competent as a singer per se, but it
Right.
was him emoting the lyrics and the poetry, and so he would have violin and guitar as accompaniment with that. But yeah, he started hanging out with the punk band because he was forever wanting to have his finger on the heartbeat of what was present day activism. And that's what punk was all about, So I loved Alan. I lived with him for a minute, and he was a
Oh,
great man.
cool. Yeah, what I find, and I would equate this to Dylan and Neil Young, in that it's not a beautiful voice per se, but it's the voice of the people.
Yeah, there you go.
It's your wacky uncle singing in the living room because you have a piano there, type of thing. I miss those days, and I hope that's one of my hopes is that, with the social media and people trying to grab attention with that, playing music in the home, and shutting off the radio and everything else, there's a certain magic to it, and
Yeah, agreed.
I think when we have artists that you can look and say, hey, he sucks as a singer, but I love his lyrics, And anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. And my hope with this whole movie, and I think about my daughter who just turned 30, is that they get an appreciation for that time period of music from the street, and where it goes, what music from the folks, so to speak. And the blues is the same way. The blues is that call and response, and that from the soul. You can feel the pain and the lament, and then ending
Absolutely.
up with some hope at the end, right?
And it's not a difficult form in the sense, it's not a hard chord progressions. It's not advanced jazz or something. It's very simple, but to do a great blues song is not simple. It's a very, very high level of artistry. You know what I mean? So it's that thing where it's like, yeah, it's simple and basic stuff, but to do it well and to touch people is, takes a real artist.
Now, I love analogies. If we look at the analogy and kind of work with me on this and instruct me, if you look at classical music, jazz, the blues, folk, I look at them as different vehicles. Classical, probably not much room for improvisation at all. Room for soul and interpreting, I guess.
Absolutely.
But you're playing it as written. Jazz, hey, as long as you end up at the same place you started, I guess that's a good thing. But a tremendous amount of freedom. Rock and roll, even more freedom from that, and the blues as well. And it sounds like I'm disparaging classical music, but I'm not. It's just I look at it as different vehicles. And I think, and as I get older, and the reason why I started this podcast was I found myself listening to the same old all the time. And I said, there's got to be something better out there. There's got to be more out there. And found, like yourself. I mean, what were my chances running into Heather Lil Mama Hardy from Tucson with this great background, right? It's just so podcast is a vehicle, I guess. Anyway, I know I talk nonsensical, but I'll come back.
No, that's great. And, thank you for that. Because it's all just about, we all just want to be heard, and we want to, I don't know how to describe it, because it's not always ego. It's just purpose. You know what I mean? Right. Of course, more success, more followers, more, people in the seats, all equal a better lifestyle. And I know I've been grinding a long time in this lifestyle. And so you're always trying to find a way to do better. But the bigger piece is just, if I'm going to put it out there, I want it to touch as many people as possible. And so podcasts have become this other way for us to get some interest. I hope people will listen to my stuff after this. That's
it is. I think it's always, for me, it's always been, when I've ever seen anybody play live, whether they're famous or not, is what's this chick's story? What's this guy's story? Why do they do that? How come they're so good at it? How come I'm not as good at it? How do they put a song together? I can write a song. I can't write a song. All this kind of runs through your head.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is there's different motivations I've found from artists. But I think what it comes down to, and you touched on it very briefly though, is you're taking us on this ride. Okay. You're getting joy out of it with the interaction and the play you have between bandmates. But you keyed in that, without that audience contributing to that, I'm taking them on a ride as well. It's very spiritual. I mean, you've heard this. You've taken me to another place and you brought back emotions. You've articulated things that I felt in my heart, but I couldn't say. And you said it for me in song or in music. Yeah. And that's a great gift to give people. And I think you keep on giving those gifts, success follows. Anyway.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's great.
Hey, Heather, I really want to thank you for being here and educating me and exploring and getting to know you a little bit. I want to encourage the audience, please look in the description. Now you know a bit about Heather. Now you have to listen and see Heather in the videos and the music that she's done. If you're in the Tucson, hey, you better call me when you come to New York.
I will.
Because we want to come and see you. I want to thank Christine Santelli for...
I was going to say that. Be sure, check out my videos and also make sure to scroll down and check out me and Christine Santelli. That's my East Coast partner. Also one of the finest songwriters I've ever worked with. So I always we have a new live CD together out. So I want to make sure people check that out too.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, send me those links because I'll certainly plug it in. Christine was a guest also on this podcast. She did this 100 songs in 100 days, has an amazing story to tell about her career. And I'm so glad you guys are connected together, and it gives you that East Coast, West Coast vibe back and forth and gets you out of the heat in the summertime, hopefully.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you got to come back to the center of the world, New York. This is where it's happening, honey.
I know. Well, I'm there all the time. Every summer, I'll be there all July. So I come and play quite a bit.
Well, I end my podcast many ways, but not often this ways. But I'm telling you this from the heart. You can account for what you have in the bank and what you own. You can't always account for the time you have. Heather, the fact that you gave me more than an hour of your time and we got this real personal discussion was really a blessing for me. And I thank you for that.
You're so sweet. Thank you very much. It was an honor.
All right. Till next time, everybody. This is the Long Island Sound. Be well.
Peace out. No.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment and visit us at gigdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace.